for the last 10 years, initially as a RESO. We were acquired by JDSU and then spun off into VRV Solutions. So that's 10 years with this particular product. Initially, I used to deploy it, so I'd travel around the world and do the engineer's job of integrating it into the operator. I then moved into project management with VRV Solutions, and now currently I'm a technical account manager, which means that I do a lot of things as well as project management. I think what happens is people give you different job titles and then give you more work. I think that's what happens. Okay, so I'm here this week, first time in Vietnam. Very pleased to be here, and hopefully we can get some useful work out of this course. So thank you for listening, and I'll move on. So this is the plan this week. So here we are Monday. So just look over here. So I'll read it out to you. I can't read that. The plan is during this week we'll run through the geo performance architecture. We'll go through the basics of opening the GUI and various map controls and how to operate the system. This is likely to be a little bit different to what you're used to. I know most of you guys are quite experienced with different products. So this will just be an introduction of how the system works. We'll run through the data explorer, filters, tables and charts. And if we get a little bit further on today, what we'll do is we'll connect to my test system. Yeah, let's see. Could we make that sharper? Is that possible? No. We can get a little sharper, a little larger.
How to turn off the note here? How to turn off the note here?
So I'm going to present a mode there.
Sans mode.
Oh, display settings. Yeah, try display settings.
Duplicate slide.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just in the quality of the slide here. So, like I say, we'll run through the introduction to the system, the performance architecture of how it all hangs together into your network, and that's quite important to understand when you go forward and working with the system, that you understand how all this is hanging together. And then we'll move on to the GUI basics and controls. At the end of each day, we'll have a question and answer session, very short session, just to make sure if you've got your understanding is okay, and that we have, if you have any questions for me. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, basically what I've done is I've broken the exercise, the course down to try and follow the books. But I understand many of you are quite experienced in this role anyway, so what we'll try and do is we'll work through this as quickly as we can, and then work on to maybe getting some use cases in. Ordinarily, I would connect you to your system so that perhaps you could open up a few GUIs and work a few map controls yourself. Currently, that's not available. It's still under deployment, scheduled to be online very soon, but right now it's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to a test system into VRV Solutions. So I'll just run you through some basic exercises or basic analysis on the VRV test system. Unfortunately, I can't give you access to that because you would require a VPN, but I'll run it from my laptop and we'll take any questions. So, not ideal, but we'll work it through the rest of the week, and maybe we'll get access. Let's see how quickly the system comes online. Right, so let's move on. Overview of what I've just said really here. So what I'm trying to do is follow the plan. But as you can see, I'm trying to condense it as quickly as I can, and maybe today we'll get to working with some analysis. Okay, so this is the important bit before we move on to the analysis, so you can understand what's happening with the geo system. And then day 2 to 4, system tools. We'll have a look at a few use cases. We'll talk about templates and scheduled reports. This is another aspect of the system which may or may not align with what you've used previously. and we'll cover some administration of the system, just so that you can do some basic user checks to be happy with the quality of the data. This is your system scope here. This is from our solution design. So this is, as I understand it, what your network looks like, and this is what Geo will look like. So there will be some rotation required of the input data to operate this system. That's yet to be decided how that will work. I'll perhaps talk about a little bit how that might work later on. But you can see here, this is the licensing that we're going to have. You'll be licensed for 20 simultaneous users. We'll talk about users later on. And here we'll talk about layer 3 retention and 30 days summary. It says summary retention here, but it's call retention, call data retention for 30 days. So any data that's been post-processed, that's processed in the system on the fly, will be held for 30 days. That can be increased. This is just a little bit of a sales point. It could be increased, but right now it's 30. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the architecture of what you're getting. So this is the Nitro Geo platform here, and this is your network. You can see here we've got Ericsson, Huawei, and Nokia. The Ericsson data from the ENOBs and the RNC are collected by the ENM, Ericsson Network Manager. These call traces are set up to provide the data at the ENM, and they will be pulled in via SFTP into the Geo system. This will happen every 15 minutes for ENOBs and 1 or 15 minutes for the RNCs. Okay, so when we connect to that and we define which RNCs and which ENOBs are going to be ingested into the system, this is set up here in the SFTP process. Huawei, they will use the U2000 or U2020 trace server. So the NodeBs and the ENOBs will be distributed across the trace servers. And again, they will generate files that are SFTP'd into the system. This happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for each of the in-scope RNCs or ENOBs. For Nokia, it's slightly different. For the NodeBs or the RNCs here, they connect to the Nokia Layer 3 data collector, which we refer to generally as Megamon. This Megamon has a specific Geo output, which links to a VRV Geo data collector. So there is a process involved here and some VRV software. It's either run on the Megamon or a separate server. And what we do at this point is we condense some of this information. So we're not allowed to use this particular feed. What we do here is we condense the information in this VRV compatible feed, and then we feed that back in files to these loaders here. So that's for 3G. Okay, so we get a file for the 3G. For ENOBs, it's slightly different. The Nokia ENOBs use streaming data, and they stream the call trace data to our data collector, which aggregates the call traces from multiple megaplexes or DCAP, or whatever Nokia refers to as today. So megaplex or DCAP streams to our data collector. So many of those can stream to one data collector, and that single data stream is then fed back to the Nitro Geo platform. So that's in essence how we get the data. Now, when we get to the Nitro Geo platform, there's a couple of things that are important here. So what we need is, this is our Nitro Geo platform here. We have a series of things called loaders. So what we do is we take those files and we parse them, we geolocate the calls within, and then we store it into the Nitro Geo database. The important thing here, this is a cluster of a clustered database. So we moved away from using Oracle that required many licenses, and we've got into a clustered database. So if we need to expand it in the future, we just add more loaders. That cluster is resilient. If we lose a database here, one of the database servers, then that cluster will carry on performing. Okay. Now there may be some impact to your performance, but it does mean that we can lose some hardware and the system will carry on working. Okay. A couple of components in here. You can see here we have our loader servers. They're are two different types of service in here. There are file-based for 3G, and they have their own distinct loaders. And then for 4G, we have a clustered operation that we refer to as lightning. Not listed here, but basically that's what we have. So we have two sets. We've got the file-based loaders and the cluster. Now the cluster processes all the eNodeB data from all these vendors at the same time. So we have an initial parser and a stream into Kafka, which is one of the processes in our cluster, and then that's collectively processed. We parse the files, we work out the timing, we carry out some iteration process on there. We then geolocate each call segment. I'll talk about call segments shortly, but it's important to note that we look at call segments within a call, so I'll describe how they're broken up. Once we've processed those, we then load this into the NitroDB. That is then available from the application server, which is how you, the user, will access this system. Okay? So you will get a remote desktop protocol into here. So you run the RDP from your system, and you'll get access to the geo, and you'll be able to run the various applications within the GUI that we'll come to shortly. Very important point here is that we have data from all your eNodeBs, your RNCs. When that arrives at geo, we need to know the topology of your network, and that comes from here, which is the OSS network configuration data at the bottom right-hand side. So normally daily, what we do is we take the configuration management from the OSS, the ENM if it's Ericsson, it's a NetAct export if it's Nokia. I can't remember the name of the Huawei OSS, but basically from all these vendors, we take that CM, configuration management dump. We also need a planning file dump from your RF planning tool. Is that asset or atoll here? Asset or atoll for RF planning? Whatever tool it is you're using. So we take an output from that, and we merge the two in this cluster here. So what we're trying to do is get the topology, all the relevant parts, configuration of your eNodeBs and RNCs, and we merge that with the RF tool, which normally contains things like latitude, longitudes, azimuths, beam widths, etc. So we merge those together, and we use that in a reference database. So that when the call trace files arrive and can be parsed by our loaders, then at that point we can look up that network information and identify the serving cell, neighbor cells, etc., and the various parameters, and we use that then to geolocate the call at that point. Okay? So it follows that this aspect is very important. Without the details that we don't really know what to do with, and that impacts the geolocation. So they're the three inputs, if you like, to the geosystem. Any questions on the overview, the architecture? No? Okay. A couple of other things we've got here. So I've mentioned here about the users. The user system, it can either be controlled locally or integrated more than likely into your Active Directory network. From view, is that Active Directory in this deployment?
I think yes, software is installed already.
Yeah. So what will happen is your Active Directory system will control access to this system, and we'll have user groups. Okay, so we have two user groups. We have SPI and non-SPI. So once they're set up in Active Directory, you as users will be given specific authority over what you can see in the system. Okay, So if you have an SPI account, what that means is you can see the IMSI and IMEI, you can see the subscriber identity in clear. You see it as it's recorded. Okay. If you have a non-SPI, then that subscriber identity is encrypted. It's obfuscated. Okay. So what you can actually do, and we'll cover this in the system, if you are a non-SPI user and your operator has decided that you, for whatever reason, or your role, cannot see the real IMSIs or IMEIs, when you interact with that information with somebody who is an SPI user, the SPI user can copy the encrypted value of the real IMSI, and he can pass that to the non-SPI user, and vice versa. So the encrypted version is interchangeable. So you as an SPI user can then input that, and you will see the real IMEIs, and vice versa. If you're a non-SPI user, you will see the encrypted version. We'll try and look at that later if we can. Okay, so that's how we control what you can see in the system. There's also other users in here. So power user might become an administrator, and the administrator can carry out other functions in the geo system. We also have a web proxy. One of the things we need to do is to access maps, so that when you're running the raster analysis, the map tiles are updated on the fly, so the system is connected to the internet. So when you move around the map or zoom in and zoom out, the system retrieves the map tiles from Bing Map Server. The system is also monitored, so the information from here, the current status of the loaders, memory, CPU usage, the loading status, is it processing data or not? There's no customer data passed out of here, it's purely performance data from the system, and that's pushed to the RV monitoring, so that our support guys, when they get a ticket, they can look at the system without having to log on, and they can make some various determinations as to the status. You can also have visibility of that yourself. So you can have a geo-monitoring account. If you're an administrator, perhaps you might want to look at that. There's various other things we can do also with web servers and report publishing. Is there any email integration in this particular project? Is there any email integration in this project? Integration for reports, no?
Not yet.
No, okay.
Hello, John. Can you send me this slide?
Yes.
And so that I can forward to the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want it now, or should we do it?
Now, now you can. Please.
1 second.
Please send this slide to email for me. Email to me.
Just How do we share this via Wi-Fi? How do we cast this to Chile? I just lost it.
Okay, let me help you. I'll go to board. Can make one screen you want to share, maybe.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you much. Okay. Apologies for that. We just had to send the slide. So that is essentially the geoarchitecture. Does anybody have any questions before we proceed? No? Okay. Once you get onto the system, and we'll come to that live later on today, you will access the geo application, and you can see here that you will be presented with this particular interface. So it's broken down logically, and it shouldn't be too different from the kind of thing we're used to here. So we have our quick access functions over here, our main functions. They're kind of self-explanatory. We have a message log down here. Often we enable this to see the status of the analysis. We can move across here our document name, so we can update this document name if we save it. From here, we can look at the grid calculator, filters. We'll talk about filters later. List names again, and importing polygons we'll talk about later. We can schedule reports from here, so we can make the system work for us when we're not online. And we can also do some web publishing. We have a specific web server on the system that we can publish to, and that link can then be given to other people for them to look at the analysis. The basis of the geo tool here is your presentation canvas, and this is your workspace where you'll drag the analysis. Now in Geo, remember what I said about the data being stored for 30 days within the collected database. So what you're going to do is you're going to create the analysis you want in here, and then when you run that analysis will send that SQL on the fly, or the specific query language, and then bring that via the REST interface, pull it back into the system here. Okay, so there's nothing preordained, there's nothing pre-canned, there's no pre-analysis carried out. You're going to go away and analyze the raw data and bring that data that you want back into the system. This is our data explorer here on the left. You can have that floating or docked. Okay, I normally operate it docked, but that's entirely up to you. And you can see in here that we have the various analysis. I'll get a better view of this when I connect to the system. But you have some common analysis, and then we run via the technologies. And then if you open that, you get a list of analysis that you can then drag onto the canvas to run. Within the map that controls itself, you've got a map. So if you drag that to the canvas workspace, you will present it with a map. And we can talk about how we can set the default areas for that map for you if you want to define the area that will open up. We can drag a chart onto there. We can also look at legends. We'll talk about that later. Tables, and we can also do a text box. Often if we're publishing to web, we might want to add some text in there so whoever gets that analysis, whoever looks at that analysis, can then see what was going on. So you can write a quick summary in that box, text box. Down here, we also have the list of running analysis. So once you drag these analysis over, then you have your list here, so you can see what's currently running. You get the ability to delete those too if you need to. You can see here once we have the tabs here. So once you drag an analysis into the center of the screen, that will also be available as a tab down here. I talked about the message log. That's perhaps not important to you as a user, but sometimes I use it just to make sure that the analysis is running, and I can monitor how long it's been running for. We'll talk about performance and expectations for later on in the course. What else have we got here? Yes, you've got your various zoom settings, so you can slide in and out of the map. Very straightforward application to operate, I believe so. We'll go through these particular tabs later, what's available here. You can have multiple canvases on here. The one thing to note is when you initiate, so you can have multiple analysis here. And when you initiate that, you can have a global run. So you can say run all analysis in this canvas. So those analysis will run. They won't run in parallel, they will run sequentially. Okay. Why don't they run in parallel? Well, you imagine 20 users all trying to run stuff in parallel. That's no longer 20 users, that's multiples of analysis trying to access the data. So what we try and do is to control the data that's being accessed and manage the resources at the database. So we do it sequentially. Okay. Now, obviously, if you have a really big filter setting, the analysis takes longer to run. If you have narrow filters, then the analysis will run quicker. Any questions on the GUI before I move on? Okay. So here we are, opening our map control. You can see here what we've done is we, like I said earlier, we drag the map to the canvas. This particular map opens up, and we get the visualization of your cell topology. Deliberately here, I've not put the map on, but you can imagine there will be a map behind that. And here we have our vertical network layer here with our site cells. And at this point, we're actually we're showing the GSM cells. So you can select the specific cells that you want to see on your map. Okay. We also can cover small cells as well, but I don't think that's part of what you purchased. Within here, so we've got our network layer, that's obvious. And you can see here that here's our sites. So it tells you that it's a multiple technology site. And here is our particular cells that we have available. In your network, of course, it will be just UMTS and LTE. Our virtual Earth actually controls whether or not you're seeing a roads map or whether or not you're seeing a satellite type map. And these two here are not applicable in your instance. This is two separate systems that we run for configuration alarms. That's not integrated in your system. And to be honest, that's not integrated in many systems. So that's really it. Drag your things across, and here we go. At the top, we can go backwards and forth into the last view or pan. We have the ability here with this little green icon here to search for regions. So, for example, if you want to search for a specific location in your network, you click on this, type in the name of the place you want to go to, and the system will fly to that location. You can also zoom in and out of the map here using these. You have a select tool here, so where you can select an area and zoom in on that. You have here that's an area select. This is the individual select. So if I drag that on and hover this arrow, this black arrow here, what we can do is we can hover it over the cells, and that will bring up the cell information. We can use the pan here, so this hand, if we click that, we can then drag the map around to wherever you want to go. We'll talk about these functions later, but essentially this is the call spider. This is raster analysis. We can also do some cell analysis and look at the scrambling code analysis too. We'll talk about those later when we're looking at the actual functionality of the system. Okay, so that's in essence the Geo GUI. Any questions on the Geo GUI? When you drag multiple analysis in here as well, by the way, you can order the analysis. So sometimes, certainly when I'm doing it, you're probably a little more structured than me because you're doing this regularly. But when I do it, I tend to think, oh, I'm just going to run this analysis. And basically what you can do at that point is you can order them into a logical progression of analysis that you want to go through. Again, we can look at that shortly. And here we go. This is what I was talking about earlier. So here's our previous zoom level. So if we zoom in and out, we can go back and forth. We can hide the analysis panel. Here's our map search. We talked about that. Map zooming, map pan select. Call spider, neighbor analysis. So we can look at the online neighbors of a particular cell that we're looking at. Raster analysis of point, again, this is useful when we come onto the RF maps where we can hover over a particular bin, and that will give us the information within that bin. We can show selected cells. So basically when we select a group of cells, we can show which cells we've got selected, scrambling codes, physical cell IDs. We can also create polygons in there, so we can draw our own polygon. We can save that. Ruler, so we can measure distances between the map. And here we go, physical cell IDs, scrambling codes. We can go to the full extent of the map, refresh the GUI, and we can also do some exports to Google Earth and other functions. Map info, I think, is one. So there are some functions we will, as we go through it, we start to use the system, we will explore those functions a little more. So this is the upper canvas control that we talked about earlier. And what we've run here on this particular analysis is we've dragged a UMTS best server analysis, and that is going to show us the best server available over the time period that we selected and for the specific frequency that we selected. And this is how we can manipulate this. So if we look at the top here, we can see here we have a little triangle on this best server, and that is our filter filter editor. So if we click on that, we get the opportunity to change aspects of that analysis that we want to look at. So we can select geographical areas, time periods, frequencies, RNCs. You will see very shortly how we can do that. And we've selected virtual Earth here, although you can't see it because the analysis results are overreading this. What you can also do here is from the properties on here, you can set the opacity. So actually you can effectively see the map behind that. If you make that more opaque, you'll be able to see the map behind it. Once this analysis has been selected, we have the option to edit the filter, clear the filter. Some analysis will not run unless they have a specific filter applied to them, and it will tell you that at the time. So if you need to filter that analysis, it says you must have one of these filters enabled. And then we have a calculate analysis and force. So once you drag that, you set your filter up, the next action is normally to calculate the analysis. So you would apply that. If your analysis was unsuccessful, maybe you made an error in the filter. I've done that numerous times. What happens is that you don't get the data back that you want, and you think, oh no, I need to change this filter again. You can then force calculate that analysis, because this has an analysis cache. So if you've run an analysis before, that analysis will be received from the cache. And if somebody else has run that analysis previously, it will be retrieved from the cache. Say, for example, connection KPIs for eNode B. Somebody's run it previously. When you run it, if it's already been run, it pulls from cache, not the database. So if you change something here, you need to hit force calculation to make sure that it takes your updated filter. You can do other things if you realize you made a mistake or you want to change your focus. You can look at the ribbon, the top of the ribbon here, by selecting canvas. You have very similar functionality here. Okay. We're talking about using the option of the database to be updated on this level in the document. Okay. So the document means that any number of canvases that you've got open, you can calculate all within there without going to those particular tabs. You might build up multiple tabs, change. I've updated a global filter and let's calculate all. So that's in the document. The document has multiple canvases, and this one is the same kind of thing, but only on the current canvas. Okay. So if you've got multiple analysis in there, you can then calculate them or recalculate them again on that particular canvas, or like I say, in the document. Okay. This is an interesting tick box here. I normally have it checked, but what that means is if you drag on a raster analysis or something that doesn't require a filter, that raster analysis will automatically start to run if that is ticked. Now that is a useful thing sometimes. sometimes you're dragging an analysis on and you haven't yet set up the filters or the geographical areas. And what happens then is you have to then cancel the analysis. You'll have the option to cancel it here by clicking on that particular analysis and cancel it, or using the global filter here to stop the running analysis. So there's your big stop buttons. So if you don't want any of that to happen, you need to make sure that when you open the document that you deselect the running of analysis. And that way allows you to retain control than accidentally setting off and starting analysis when you don't need to run it. Okay. And then basically if you deselect that, you can build your analysis up, go back to the ribbon, and then hit the calculate all button. And anything that you set up will then be calculated. Okay. I think this will become clearer when we start to use the system, hopefully. Is this similar to what you've been using previously? Is this similar at all to any of your previous products, or different completely? No, I'll take it that it's different. So we have multiple analysis. We talked about earlier. We've got tables, we've got geographical analysis, we've got raster analysis, lots and lots of different analysis available in the system, and you will have access to view that shortly. When we actually expand this, let's see. So you can see here we've got some analysis available down here. We've got call count, call table, traffic volume MOU, and we've got a locations analysis. And you'll see here there are little icons alongside those analysis. Now, to get used to using Geo, you'll see here that most of the analysis that we drag over have an icon next to it or available in the data selector. And these actually mean something here. So we can see here that this green with the blue in it, we're looking at a geographical bin raster or vector points analysis, and that means that you require a map. Okay, that just gives you an indication of what you need to put onto the canvas before you drag that analysis to it. If you try to drag an analysis, a table analysis onto a map, it will tell you, sorry, you can't do that. So it does actually tell you what is permissible, but it does help to know what these icons mean. So, for example, if you see the analysis requiring a table to view, drag a table to the map, drag that analysis on it. We can also look at charts, multiple geographic analysis. We'll come on to that later. So this one here might be a points map, in which case you're saying, show me the geographical points for this particular subscriber or for this particular cell or whatever filter you've set up. This one here could be the RF KPIs. So multiple geographical analysis. So it's going to give you lots of different views. It's going to give you MOU, drop rate, data throughput, all these other things are going to be mapped on a per raster basis. And that will tell you that there will be multiple options there. But again, you can drag it onto a map. Or we'll talk about legends later. Tables, analysis with a chart. So some analysis you can view in multiple aspects. So for example, a points analysis, you can drag that onto a map. You can also use points analysis in a table. So again, we'll come to that later when we start to actually get into using the system. Once an analysis is in the system and it's on your canvas, so you can see here where it says best server. So we talked about the filter. We've got a green circle here, which means that analysis has been run. We know it's been run because we can see the data up there. And then we've also, behind that, we've got the legends. So you can see this multicolored circle here. Okay. So these are the indications that you'll become used to that are alongside the analysis. So green is fairly logical. It's run and we've got valid data. You've already run this, but you've since changed the filter. So actually, you're not looking at the patch. You're not looking at the analysis that you want to see. Okay, so it's just to remind you to hit the wrong button again. The orange one, sometimes on certain analysis, certain filters are ignored. Okay, so they're not really applicable to that analysis, and that will tell you that you've set maybe an optional filter that isn't applicable to that analysis. But it's just a reminder that that's the case. So you may think perhaps the optional filter of geolocation types is applicable, and this will tell you that it isn't. For example, let's give an example here. You've run connection KPIs, and you've actually set the geolocation type to GPS. Well, actually, on the connection KPI analysis, you want to see the number of connections on that E.B. So the fact that you've set an optional filter as GPS, it won't return the connections with GPS only, so that filter will be ignored. The red one is the one I talked about earlier. That's the mandatory types. Some analysis require at least one filter, and if you try and run it and you've got the red icon, it means that you haven't applied a filter. Occasionally you will get no data. Why will that happen? Well, that's normally down to filtering conditions. Well, two things: filtering conditions, or perhaps the system is not loading data on that particular date, or you're trying to look at a period of time that has been house kept and is no longer in the system. The orange analysis, yes, you've set the analysis up, but you haven't run it yet. And then it's set up with a valid filter, that's the green star. And again, a bit like this one, it hasn't been run, and you've got optional filters. And not run requires a filter. And then you get this one here, which is a rotating red circle. The analysis is in the process of running. So normally at that point you initiated it. The analysis the query has been set up, been sent to the database, and it's going to process and return that data. I talked about sequential analysis. So if you click and run multiple analysis, one will always show us running, hopefully, and the remainder will have this little blue circle. It says that I'm in the queue and I'm ready to run. And then the bottom one, again, this will never return any data or won't run because it's saying I'm in the queue, but actually you haven't set the right filter level. So you'll get used to this. It seems a lot to take in at the beginning, but you will get used to this once you start using the system actively. Any questions on the GUI thus far? Okay. So we talked about the GUI and managing our way through this. Let's talk a little bit about filter settings. Filters are quite important. They're important because it allows you to focus on a particular area, but it's also important you start to think about performance and how you might want to extract these details and manage the data. When we're trickle loading calls into this database for 30 days, that's an awful lot of data in various different dimensions: time, location, etc. And when we access this database, we need to use a filter that's applicable to return the data that we need in the time that we need it to be returned in. I could set up a filter once this is working, and I've seen guys do this. They've set the filter up for the entire country. The chap I was working with did this for Saudi Arabia. And I don't know if you've ever been to Saudi Arabia, but it's huge, okay? And he was running specific analysis for the whole of Saudi Arabia and wondering why it was taking 2 hours to return. Okay? When actually, you probably could have split it in half. So you need to consider how you're going to do this, set this filtering up before you approach Geo. So here we are here. Here's our kind of Venn diagram, if you like. Entire database. We can set our geographical regions. We can set E.Bs. We can look at particular services. We can drill down into the filter and say, I want to look at voice. I want to look at data, other specific aspects of that service that you want to look into. And of course, time period here. Some time periods are more logical. If you're looking at a raster analysis for example, best sell, you might want to look at best sell over a number of days. If you're looking at a particular subscriber, again, it could be a number of days, it could be in the last hour or whatever. So you can actually control the amount of data you're pulling back here. A lot of these can actually also be controlled by lists. So we haven't covered that yet. If you have a set of VIPs or a set of cells that you're regularly working on, you can either do list management or you can use a polygon to set those up. So that's the geographical region here. You can use a geographical area in the map, not necessarily a polygon, but you can tell it to use the visible area of the map. So there are many different ways of filtering that data. Again, it really depends on your role and what you have to do with the system, whether it's you're looking at small areas, whether you're looking at a large area. And again, this becomes more logical when you start to use the system. And the important thing is when we talked earlier about having the document and the grill at the top here, and then how this applies through. We can have distinct filters on the analysis, but we can set some global filters up in the document. So by default, we get no filtering. We access everything on the server. We can actually control the bulk of that by document filter. So maybe you're looking in a region or some smaller area regularly, and you might want to set that up as your default document area. And then we can filter by individual canvases. So if I had a region, I might do that at the document level. If I had particular cities, I might do that particular canvas if I broke my analysis up. Only you know what's the best way of filtering for you. And this is the hierarchy, if you like, of the filter. So these document filters I tend to apply geographically. And then as I get down, I define my filters more. For example, this could be a subscriber analysis. This could be device analysis. So there could be different filters applied at the analysis level, but based and a higher geographical at the document or canvas. Okay, and you can see there are various ways of doing this. You can edit the document filter. So the analysis I'll show you later, I've edited that document filter because I'm looking at a particular country, and anything else I make up with my own canvas down here to suit the analysis that way. Okay. I think that's relatively straightforward. Within the Geo form tool, the document use different file types. So if you open up a Geo document, you run it from the icon on the start. You can save it as different things. So the good thing is you can save your work. This is our standard Geo document that you open. And when it comes to save as, you can save it as a template. The templates you can pre-populate and then run later. And then from that point, you can output it as a report, or you can look at it as Geo documents here, and as a report, which is read only. Okay. What I normally do is save Geo docs because I'm coming back to that time and time again. So I might want to change filters on it. I often save other aspects of the documents that I'm working as a regular report. So for some examples of that might be, I want some reports overnight, KPIs in my area to be done daily before I arrive at my work. So I'll save that as a specific scheduled report. When I come in the morning, all that analysis has been pre-canned, so I can look at the KPIs and whatever I define in the morning, and it's all done for me. But normally I just use save as Geo document types, and then you can output those as reports that are read-only, and you can distribute those via the web server. Okay, so you can actually publish it from inside the GUI into the web. Again, I think that'll become more clear when we start going through the file types. So that's really an introduction to the Geo system. Does anybody have any specific questions at this moment in time? I guess we need to get our hands on it, don't we, and dig a little deeper. It's 10:20. Do we want to take a short break? Is that okay? Just to... yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll just take a short break there.
bảo dưới anh thích chứ nhỉ? Wi-Fi ấy.
Nó sẽ thay đổi theo giải khác nhau trên IP thì nó sẽ như
Okay, we'll just take a short break for those that are online. Thank you. Hi everybody online. We're about to restart. Just a few more people coming back into the room. Hope you can hear me. I'll try and not talk too fast. Okay, so apologise for not speaking Vietnamese. So this next session, what I'm going to do is connect to Geosystem and start to expand on the concepts that we discussed earlier. Okay. Okay, we all here? Good. Thank you for listening to that earlier. I know it's difficult that you don't have access to the system, and I apologise. Ideally, you would have access to the system, and that would help you greatly. Okay? That normally happens. But like I said, unfortunately, the system is not successful yet. We did have this discussion before I came, and I'll do my best to give you the quality training that I can. If we can get you access to the system as quickly as possible, we will. Okay, but just please bear with me at this moment in time. Okay. Thank you. So, welcome back. I hope you're all rested. So this is my laptop. Not very exciting. There's not anything on there that's very interesting. With a GVim that I didn't know to use that in the past. I'm always manipulating text files, so GVim is important. So when I need to access Geo, and where you guys need to access Geo, you will launch a remote desktop connection on your laptop. You'll connect via your Active Directory. So right now I'm connected via VPN into my VRV system in Atlanta, USA. Okay. And I'm going to access this system that the guys have set up for me. Now this system has some historic data in it. And sadly, it's not Vietnamese, but I do have permission to show this data and manipulate this data in front of you. Unfortunately, I can't give any printed copies of it because it did come from a live network. But I do have permission to use it. So right now, if I was approaching Geo, and I do this every day of my life, I will connect to various people's systems, but this one is just for you. So I'm going to connect to that. If I can remember my password. So this is going to go away to the app server. If you remember that diagram earlier, we had an application server in a box. RDP goes off there on port 3389. Okay, it makes the connection to that particular server. Okay, so in this case, this is the application server for my system in the lab. There's a whole host of other stuff on there that's nothing to do with me, but excuse me. The important icon here is the Nitro Geo Cube in the bottom left. Sorry, 1 second. Let me. Okay. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm connecting to my specific geo system. So you get a Nitro Geo login like this. The chances are you'll only have one geo area. Okay, so if you have multiple geo areas in the system, we didn't really talk about that. But in a very large country, you could break it up into 2 different geo areas, and they would need to be created on the database. But normally, in an operator, we just have one database for all. I think that's going to be the case for mobile phones. So if there are multiple geo areas, this is where you will select them.
Please share screen.
Okay, sorry.
Or maybe you haven't.
Hang on. I think this is on my remote desktop. Yeah.
I go to your email and go to meeting room. Share the screen. Window.
Em hình vẽ lương nè, em hai bạn đây cầu
Good. Cute. Okay, so in the background, what happened was when I selected the specific geo area, this is the application that came up that you saw earlier on the slides. So hopefully this is a little bit clearer now. We're actually connected to my test system, and straight away this should now start become clear. You've got your canvas, the various ribbons. We talked about the analysis here. So we launched the geo. The rest of it now starts to become obvious. If I, as I discussed earlier, I can drag a map onto that. Okay. So you can see here, these are geographical areas that I defined earlier when I talked about in my document filter, or using the file home here. What I've done is I've already set this up to, if I look at the options here, geographical area. So when I first accessed the system, what I did was I zoomed in on the map to the area that I wanted to look at, and then I right-click that map. Okay, and what I did was I copied the current map bounds select onto the clipboard, and I put them into my default document. Okay, so the next time I launched it, what happened was it comes up in that particular area. You've got various other functions here, by the way, in terms of lat.long. You can see here that cursor position or set the current map bounds for running analysis, or you can right click and set the map bounds for default for new map controls. So there are various ways of doing it, but what I did was I pasted it in. That means that every time I open a document up in this particular system, that I will get this map. Okay, and we talked about earlier the ability to see the network topology, so I just increased that. You could, of course, remove our applications on the left-hand side here by clicking that to maximize the screen. But this is my entire network that I've got loaded into this database at the moment. I'll close down some of this stuff down here because some of this is not applicable to you. Okay, so that's my area. And again, my analysis are on the left-hand side. So we drag the map on there. And like I talked about earlier, we can, for example, within that map, we could, if I select that box here, so I'll zoom in a particular area here. So I'm zooming into the tones here in Brussels. This is Brussels. Okay. Okay, so that's how basically I can control that by selecting the bounding box, or I can zoom in again using the here. Okay. There are also some additional functions in here. No, that's right. Okay, so that's me zoomed into the centre of Brussels, for example. There's other things we can do here with this system. We can look at on the network themes here. We can start to colour cells to make them stand out. So for UMTS, we might want to say, let's colour these by RNC. It's a logical. So if I drag that onto the map, this will now colour those particular UMTS cells. So you can see now that the RNCs will have a particular colour scheme. So if I deselect all my network cells in here, there we go. Sorry, it should be more obvious here. So you can see my UMTS cells now are now highlighted with the colour of the RNC within that map. So it just gives us a little bit easier way of viewing that information. So I can remove the network theme from that. Sorry, there are common themes here. This is quite a good one too, although I don't have multiple vendors in this area. But you can see that what I've done is I've now color-coded those cells by vendor. In this case, I just have to have a number of small cells in there within that region as well. And then particularly, I've got the Huawei in there, Huawei small cells, and some Spider Pro somewhere. But if you've got Ericsson, Nokia, etc. in there, they will be coloured differently. So it just allows you in a mixed area. Here we go. So I've got some of the red cells here. Look. There you go. So you can see my spider cloud within the GSM. And this is the 5G. Again, I have all this access on my system. You won't have the 5G and the radio. You just have the UMTS and so within here, we've got our search map as well. This should work. Okay. Type Brussels in there. Okay, so it's gone off and it's found me Brussels. Okay. And that generally works for anywhere in the world, but it's not. Okay. So that's actually Newbury in England, and that's where we are based. So I just thought I'd show you that before we moved on. But just to show that effectively you can go anywhere in the world on that. Obviously, if you haven't got data there, it's largely irrelevant. So let's go back to our original map. Okay. I'm just going to take those themes off for a second. So just select the theme and then we delete it. I'm sorry, I accidentally deleted the LTE cells. It's not what I intended to do. Sorry, the other cells. There we go. My apologies. Okay. You can also deselect the network layer as well. Okay. If you want specifically to remove the clutter of the cells, let me deselect the small cells and then just put LTE on there for the time being. Okay. Now within this, we talked about the tooltip. So this black icon here with the pointer, so this is the tooltip that we can start to look at. If we select that from here, and then if we hover it over the various cells, we can get the attributes associated with that particular cell. And then we can do that on a per site basis. We can do that here on a per cell basis if we hover over that. Often, if we're working on a particular cell and we need to know the attributes, if we hit the space bar, what will happen is that particular pointer will now appear in the lower window, so you can have that group of cells displayed permanently. So in case you forget any of the attributes or you just want to continuous reference, I can do that also with a site. So if I hover over that site there. Forgive me, there's a little bit of lag on this. Okay, pop to the side. Just close that one. There we go. Okay, so that's it for a particular site. It just allows you to reference that while you're carrying out your work. So I can close that. What else do we? We've got to cover the network search, maps. Okay, within the map here, we've got our virtual Earth. So if I right-click the virtual Earth here, this gives me the map option. So right now I'm on Bing Road. I can look at the Bing aerial map too. Okay, so that will give me the so we can zoom in at that level. Quite a good zoom level on the map. One thing we need to cover, of course, is that when we zoom in and out on that map, for RF purposes, Geo provides its information 50-meter bins. Okay? So anything that's RF in there, we'll see later when an analysis is coded in the 50-meter bin. The location points are not coded in the 50-meter bin. So if we aggregate data over an RF map, so any particular RSCP, we're going to aggregate over a period of time, that will appear in the 50-meter bin. If you do a particular points analysis on subscriber or handset, then that actually has an XY or lat long applied to it, and that will appear as the XY that is determined in geolocation. So it isn't restricted to a 50-meter bin for a subscriber. Okay. So we can cover some specific analysis very shortly. Let me just close this one down. So when you close the document down, it's going to ask, do I want to save changes? In this case, no, I don't mind. What I'll do is I'll launch that again. So this is some analysis that I was running earlier on this system prior to coming here, just to make sure the system was running correctly. And this is, let's have a look at the UMTS here, points. All right, so I haven't got anything on here, which is good news. So what I've done previously on this particular system is I've set up my document filter to cover my specific time period. Okay, that's in the document time period. Okay, here we go. So the document time period I didn't cover because my UMTS and LTE data is on 2 different days. Okay, so what I did here was I left the document filter clear, and then on my tabs for LTE and UMTS, you'll see that actually they're defined over different periods. So this is fairly historical data. So you can see here my time period on this analysis is 29th of November 2018. And for my LTE, you can see here that that was the 9th of October 2018. So that has allowed me to look at 2 different time periods within there by not defining it at the higher level. So I talked about the hierarchy earlier. So my geographic area is at the higher level, and then my dates are at the lower level. Okay. So with the specifically the LTE here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a few analysis on and see what happens. So we talked earlier about dragging a map on, so that's my map. And then within LTE, we should really start on UMTS. That's what I'm really just explaining the system at this moment in time. But what I can do from here is I can look into the call table, and I get a selection of analysis call tables to run. Remember here about those 2 dots. So that indicates that it's a raster analysis. So here, so call. Let's say, for example, let's look at the call table performance KPIs. So this tells me that it's a raster analysis with multiple analysis contained within. So what I'll do now to initiate that, I'll look at the call table KPIs. I'm going to drag that into the map, and that's going to go off and hopefully give me some analysis back. Okay, and this is pulled this from the cache because I ran that earlier. So you can see here within this analysis, this is now giving me a raster view of that particular area that I've selected, those ENOPs that I've got data loaded for. So we can look at these as we go through this. Connection establishment, drops, drop rate, weighted drops. We've come on to the specific definitions of weighted drops as we go through and start to run through some practical analysis. Traffic volume MOU as well. So let me just make a little bit more space on here. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, so you can see that I've got selected the traffic volume in minutes of use. So it's aggregated that minutes of use in those 50-meter bins. And I'm going to select that because I've got a subset of data open here. So what I can actually do here is I can say, okay, take me to the data extents. Okay, so that effectively stops me from having to worry about zooming in. So you can see here that this is my raster analysis of that particular group of sites, and I'll zoom into that very shortly. Just make this bigger. Okay. Belgium's quite busy in terms of sites. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this hand tool, and I'm going to drag this here, and then we can zoom into the data so we can see how this particular data is being rendered. I'll also just take the network layer off as well. Okay. So we can see here I've got a few ENOPs missing, but basically what you can see here is the volume of use, and it's color coded. So if I come down to the MOU and if I hover over that particular legend, you can see here that the counts it's giving me per bin. Now, quite often when we look at this, and this is just a tip from me, you guys do the same thing, but you'll see here that within this, we've got some MOUs that are quite low volumes. There's a number of reasons why that might be, and that could just be, we'll talk about geolocation shortly at some point today, but it could well be that something has been inadvertently put in that bin, or it could be that it's just a genuinely low area. We're not really interested in that particular area at this moment in time. So by right-clicking the legend, we can edit that color scheme. And this brings you to the color scheme editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select those two bottom items that are giving me statistically noisy data, and I'm just going to deselect them. And then what I do is I look at this color scheme here, just create a bit of space. So if I hover over that, drag and click, and I'm going to attack to here, okay, and I'll put it onto here. All right, and that's just a way that allows me to remove some of the noisy data out and allow me to concentrate on the areas that I want to look at. This is particularly MOU, so it's really just showing MOU hotspots in the centre of this town here, which I think is Brussels. But that just allows to give me a clearer picture and remove some of the statistically low levels of noise out of the system. I often do that with drops or blocks. You'll see it's really about what you want to see out of the system. If I'm looking at, say, perhaps some of the RF analysis, such as power or ECNO, I might want to just shut the low levels out, concentrate on my main areas. So it just allows me to focus. Okay. The important thing to remember about that is that if you've been in an area and changed the color scheme at that legend, if you move to another area, it may not accurately reflect what you're seeing. So basically what I can do here is recalculate that, okay? And that's important to remember after you've done that, so that you can then get back to your original picture. So trying to keep on track. Data availability, chart-based analysis. Okay, so the other couple of other things we can do here. Let's just have a look at a couple of the other things here. So I'll remove this. So what I'm looking at here is, let's have a look at drops. I've not actually looked on this previously. So this is looking at my drop rate in that particular area. And it's telling me for that period of time how many drops I'm counting in that bins. So you can see here within this area, I've got a high level of drops here up at the sheer beak area. That looks to me like it's in the area of the train station, perhaps in the North Quarter. It's been a long time since I've been to Brussels, but I think that's what it is. So you can see here within the 50 metre bin where your high level of drops are. You can also look at that as a percentage. Okay, percentage here, and you can see as a percentage of my data, that's not so significant. Where are we? Yeah, so 0 to 10%. So you could actually redefine that that color scheme here. So therefore, you could redefine that, say from 0 to 5 or whatever particular values you want to use, and then pull that back onto the drop rate, and that will re-visualize the drop rate. In fact, let's try and do that now. So I'm just going to edit this color scheme here. So I'm going to say from 0 to 5. Okay. And let me set that one. Let me add. So I can put this in, say, 5 to 10. Okay. Into the values in here.
Hello.
Let's see if I get any different values here. So I've dragged that in. I don't know if that's made a great deal of difference. I don't think I've got a large percentage of drops in this area, but that's how you would do that if you wanted to change the granularity of that particular analysis. Okay. I think with more data or bigger drops, I would have had better success then. Okay. But that's effectively your call table performance KPIs, and that's also how you might want to view an area the first time you start trying to analyze or dig into that area for any problems that may exist. Within this area here, we could also, so remember I talked here about the gray being the filter. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the polygon item here, and then I'm going to create my own polygon around that particular area here. So I'm just going to drag it and click the points. Okay, so we'll do that. You can see here that the polygon layer 2 has now popped up. It's available in my app analysis. Now I connected those up. And what I can actually do at this point is then I can drag that onto my filter. So all I did then was I literally clicked that polygon was available, and I dragged it over that filter. And that's how I can integrate that. There is another way of doing it. I can also click on the filter itself. Okay, if I double click on that, and this brings up the filtering options on that particular one. You can see here that I've set the geographic area. So if I clear that, click the geographic area again, and I say use polygon. Okay, so I can browse to that in the local folder. If I'd have saved it, of course, I haven't actually saved it yet. But the other thing I can do also is drag that polygon layer. So if you have if you're setting the specific analysis up, you can drag your polygon layer in there, apply and run. So now it's going to make a recalculation because it's never done this before. I've just created this polygon. So it'll go off to the database and calculate the performance KPIs for that particular polygon. Okay. And we'll get exactly the same things again, but this time it'll be localized within that polygon too. So here we go. The data is now loaded. So you can see the analysis stopped running, turned green. So if I select the MOU now, I can also deselect the polygon too, and that gives us our KPIs within that polygon. Looking at various ways of manipulating this data, we can right-click this analysis here, and that brings up another thing we can look at. So we can center map on the layer. What that will do is that will bring that analysis into the center. And we can zoom to the layer extents, it can zoom into that analysis. We can export, open it in map info, export things to Instagram to CDF if it's appropriate. And we can also look at properties, which is what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to change the properties for that analysis, and I'll show you why in a second. So within this, we've got some attributes here. The main one really is this is relevant here. So what you can do is you can type in a new name for this. So if you've opened up different map analysis, you can then say traffic volume, MOU for your particular area, the town or whatever. And then when you run another one, you can also change that. So you will have the different names of the analysis and some customized to whatever your particular area you're running at. The other one here is the opacity, which I talked about earlier. So what I can do now is just reduce the opaqueness of this particular, okay? And there we go. What that allows me now to sort of view the map behind that. If I zoom in, you get a better picture. Okay. So in this case, I've dropped it to 50. You can go lower than that if you need to, and start to look at my hotspots, be they drops, or in this case, MOU. Again, that's available on each particular analysis. So, for example, if I went back to blocks at this point, that's interesting, isn't it? Because an interesting point of the geolocation here, that this is probably a transport hotspot. So it's logical that where you're getting people within that hotspot, that you probably want to start introducing blocks and drops into that area with higher usage. So to remove that, of course, I just go back into the properties again. Okay, so I can just restore that now. 100. Okay. I talked about earlier. We can look at the cells back on. So here's the network layer. I'll take the GSM cells off, UMTS cells, NR cells, and small cells. Take those guys off. So we can start to look at, so look here, neighbor spiders. So we can look here at the, on their neighbors for that particular cell. So that's a cell group here. By ARFCN, call spider, we'll show that later. Raster analysis at point. Let me look at the particular drops. So if I select raster analysis at point, and basically I hover over that, and then that's going to give me the values I've got in that particular bin. Raster analysis at point is useful if we're looking at PCI or best cells, and you can see then the number of cells that are contributing to that particular bin. And again, we'll look at that later on. What else? Selected cells window, scrambling code connector, PCI connector. So we can look at this here. So I can select the specific sectors on there to show me the relative PCIs. Okay. Again, we'll cover that more in the analysis, and that's logical. There's my. So if I click and drag, that's giving me my ruler. You'll see also my ruler appears up in this, the user controls here. If I select that and delete that, okay, so I've removed the ruler from the page. So I think it's fairly logical to operate. That covers most of the functionality. It would be better if you go get your hands on it and get used to it. But I think that's kind of covers it. Anyone got any questions on the GUI or operation? So I'm just going to close this map down in the corner. Okay. I'll just close a few of these down. So I talked earlier about the various things we can drag onto here. So I'm going to show you a little chart now. So within analysis, administrative, and LTE, I'm going to show you here the loading status of LTE. Now, what's important about LTE in the system, if you remember the architecture that I talked about, is that the LTE data is streamed into the system, but it's also produced extremely effectively to the database. So what we can do to check that the system is loaded correctly is we can drag a chart onto there, and we can use a streaming data loading chart. So this, for that particular day, remember I'm using the particular dates for this, which was October 2018. So you can see here that I've streamed data into the database of that system at that particular time. Now, normally on a system, you would expect that data to rise during the day and fall during the evening. So you get almost like a sine wave, a curve going through there. So you can base this is running on the day before. That's the default parameters. So it shows that there is data in that database. And you will become familiar with what your network looks like in terms of recording data. So you can do a quick check of this to make sure that the data is available on the dates that you're analyzing before you carry out that analysis. Okay. We can also have tables on here. So, for example, I talked about points earlier. So if I look in points analysis down here, this is just an example of how tables and maps work. So if I look at locations, so locations here, this is so this is a generic way of showing the subscriber location. Right, okay, so this tells me that it's LTE points analysis, but it also tells me that I can run it on a map or a table. So I can view those points on the map. Or alternatively, if I'm wanting to dig further into it, sometimes it helps to actually have those points in the table. That's not intuitive, but it does help. So, for example, in this case, because I have an option, I need to either drag a map icon or a table on there. So I'll do that on the table, okay, and then I'll look at locations here. I'll drag that on, and now it's going to ask me to put a filter in here. And I've got some options. I can either show the filter editor, or I have a predefined filter that I can drag into there. So right now, I'm just going to show the filter editor. Again, you'll be familiar with this by now. So these are the common aspects of this. So I'm looking at points. It's not a good idea to show points for everybody on there because it's just a mass of geolocated points. Normally, I would use this for a subscriber, or maybe an E node B. So let me look at this. I haven't got a large data set in there. I'll come back to that in a second because I need to try and define an E node B for that one. So I'll review that in a minute. But the point I'm trying to make is this: that this will be a table, and then equally I could have also done this on a map. So the point is here that if you're doing a points analysis, you need to define which particular format you want to view it in. You either need to view it in the table or view it in the map. Okay. So we'll look at the actual analysis later on. We've looked at the running and cancelling analysis. Okay, timeouts. Right. So your data explorer on the left here can show your analysis. You can also have the local folder. So anything that you save or create locally, such as polygons, will end up in here, and results, and any neighbor plans that you may have looked at earlier. Again, this is specific analysis, and problem areas. We'll talk about that later. One of the things we didn't talk about on the Canvas tab is the ability to look at some other aspects of geo as well, and we'll cover that later this week, such as how to identify problem areas or neighbor planning, specifically scrambling coats or PCIs. We'll cover that later. So let's have a look at this. All right, so here's some points analysis I did earlier. Let me just create polygon again. sec of it. This is for UMTS. So I've created that polygon, and if I right-click that polygon, I can save that. Okay, it's going to save it in my local folder. So let's just call this test polygon. Okay, and then if ever I need to go back and look at my own polygons again, then they're saved in the local folder. It is also possible to define a global folder as well. We perhaps cover that later, so that you could share polygons with each other. But right now I don't need that, so I'm going to delete it. Okay. So I think logically that's the GUI covered. Okay, one other thing with your books, for those of you who have books, you'll see referenced in 1.11 to summary tables. Okay, I didn't get these books until last week. Summary tables should have been removed. Summary tables refers to the Oracle database only, where what we did was we used to summarize some of the data ahead of time in the Oracle database. Because of the way we've re-architectured this, what we actually do now is every analysis is run from the raw core tables. So summary tables are no longer applicable to Geo. So please make sure that you don't make reference to summary. Okay, let me delete this. Okay. See if there's anything else I haven't covered in the GUI. 1 second. Okay. I think we covered running and cancelling of the analysis. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier within the GUI. Okay, so you can see that these analyses have run. We've got the green circle here. And then from the top of this particular canvas here, you'll see that's my checkbox I was telling you there. To deselect to stop the analysis running automatically. I've got it checked. And here I can force calculate all, so I can redo those again. So by hitting that, you can see now what's happened is that both these analyses have, this one's now running. You can see the circle spinning, and this one is in the queue. Okay. They may return. I force calculated this. So if I force calculate, it won't go to the cache. Okay. So if I just said calculate, that would have gone onto the cache and got the cache results. You can now see that my points, my locations have returned. And now it's going to do the core table analysis. This was on UMTS, wasn't it? Okay. Just a couple of filters for my calls. So when I plotted the locations there, this was just me doing the demo really, but what I was looking at was filtering by service group. No particular reason for that. I just decided to filter by a few groups. So you can see now that all that analysis can now run. The UMTS. Okay, and UMTS you can see gives you a same kind of thing as LTE, but you can see here you've got a few more aspects of UMTS that are there. So we've got CS and PS drops in there. For example, there's my CS drop rate. Okay, not a great deal of issues there, relatively low. I could look at the CS drops particularly, see if there's any hot spots if they come in. Okay. Yeah, oh, it's minuscule drops. I can't see any that are in there. We go to layer extents. Data, layer. Okay. Okay, just don't want to show me a lot of drops here. There's not a lot of activity on UMTS, it would seem. I can look at RSCP and let's have a look at this. Okay, there's my data. Okay. There we go. Better. Okay, so there's my binned RSCP average for that particular UMTS area that I was looking at. Again, roll over that, and you can see that there's the reported signals there. Okay, all looking pretty good. There's a couple of grey areas in there, but generally speaking, that's looking pretty fine in that particular area. Clearly, you could use this analysis to identify areas of poor coverage. That seems okay. We can also look at the ECNO, ECI node here. Okay, look for particular areas of quality there. So again, yeah, not bad. There's a couple of spots here where it's worse than 10. Yeah, so you can identify areas with poor ECI node or RSCP using this analysis. Okay. Anything else on here that I've missed? A couple of other things that we haven't covered. You can look at the version you've got here by clicking the help tab. Sometimes help if you're reporting an issue. I know we don't like to talk about reporting issues, but if ever you do, you can report the geo version that you're using. Additionally, you've also got the help documentation here. So if you need any assistance whilst you're in flow, you can do various word searches, feature searches, or whatever to get access to the documentation. So let's have a look at working with analysis, common analysis tab. Okay, so there you go. So this can give you some guides here as how to do this. In this particular talk, we're talking about drop call investigation here. So this can give you a 1 to n steps to help you with your investigation. Sorry? No. There's far more than that. I mean, that's just a common analysis. We've got working with map analysis. So common. So we've got drops there. I mean, some drops and blocks would work in a similar way. We use the similar analysis to that. But yeah, you can working with analysis, common analysis task. Yeah, that's a good point. That the common analysis. There is another folder in Geo called Analysis Com, and within that you can look at some various analysis that happen to be common across aspects of the system. Some of these you won't have, okay? So I'm not going to go into this particular application here. There was a question about applications earlier, but we can talk about how that's not available, if you like, at some other point. We can look at calls, for example, so we can look at connections here, okay? What I tend to do is I tend to use the technology-specific analysis rather than the common. But you can use this common analysis on say, calls. So that'll look at your connections, start times, and also the technology. So you might want to filter that by a particular subscriber or something like that. So you would get the details back on that subscriber. There's also some of the network kind of thing here for cell parameters. Depending on the functionality you've got, depends on how many analysis end up in common. So with UMTS LTE, the chances are you'll just run it from the UMTS and LTE folder. Okay? But if you need any assistance, then that's where to go. Yeah.
But in the help, I see only one. In the help. common analysis in your head. I see only one drop analysis. How about another?
Sorry, in
your head.
in here, in help. Okay, common. Okay, I see what you mean. Common analysis tasks. Yeah, that's interesting. That I would have thought would be more. I mean, the block analysis is basically the same as the drops in a way, but it's not. Yeah, I'll find out why there's not more in that. I would expect perhaps there are some more common analysis tasks. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were referring to the common analysis folder, which is two different things. Okay, I'll have a chat, have a discussion with the people in the office as to where the rest of that is. And then you've got the analysis reference in here, okay, which gives you a detail. So all the analysis that we've covered in the left-hand side, if you click on this help here, it'll tell you exactly what analysis that is referenced to, and the details behind that particular analysis. Okay. So that's to help you if you get stuck while you're using things. Okay. Okay, any particular questions on the GUI? No, that's it's easier if you're able to use it yourself, but if there's any particular questions. Okay, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do is look at some UMTS analysis, which kind of we've got here anyway. So we've looked at the call table analysis and we've looked at the alarms. Let me just close those alarms down. Sorry, call table analysis. So one of the other things we might want to look at here when we start digging into RF analysis is we can look at the best server, for example. So I've run the call table analysis here. Let's have a look at this.
Yeah, I think just wanting to stop here.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, if it's a good time to stop for lunch. Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Every lesson we should stop at 11:30.
That's fine. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right. I was thinking 12 in my head, but it's 11:30. You're right. Yeah. Okay. Apologies. Okay, so I know that was quite a lot to take in, and it was very, very wordy from me, a lot of this. And so if there are any questions that come into your heads over lunch, then please let me know. Okay. Well, thanks. So we'll suspend now for lunch, and we'll come back at 1:30, I believe. Yes. 1:30. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I will tell later. I will tell it.
2:30. Chiều thì là từ 1:30 đến 4:30. Bây giờ mình nghỉ thì em mời anh chị đi ăn trưa ở cái tòa nhà ngay bên cạnh, tòa nhà San An ở 1.
Okay, guys, we're going to stop for lunch at this moment in time. We're returning at what time? What time will we return?
1:30.
Yeah, we'll return at 1:30. Yeah, 1:30 p.m. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, by all means, let me know in the chat, and I'll try and answer them. Thank you.